Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the Time to Vote webinar on March 24th here in the afternoon. We're so glad you could join us across the great state of Pennsylvania, the Keystone State. And we wanted to today give you, as business leaders, an opportunity to learn about the Time to Vote initiative, which is a national effort, nonpartisan, program that Patagonia, PayPal, and Levi Strauss initiated back in 2018. And essentially, it's focused on having companies and employers give their employees and workers time off to vote on November 3rd. We've modified the agenda a little bit today to reflect the situation with the coronavirus, and also wanted to talk a little bit about a new initiative called Vote at Home, which is focused on giving people the opportunity to vote entirely by mail. The US Congress is in the process of considering authorizing funding for that initiative. And as you may know, a number of states already vote entirely by mail. And because we thought this was topical, one of our speakers today is Rachel Boss with the Pennsylvania Department of State, and we'll hear from her in a moment. So let me turn the mic over for a moment to my colleague, Sarah Bonk, and she wants to tell you a little bit about Business for America and the work we do, and then we'll hear from Rachel Boss and the rest of our speakers. So Bonk, I'll turn it over to you.
Great. Thank you, Richard. Thanks to our panelists again for joining us and talked about this today. Thanks to our co-hosts for joining us and helping to promote this event and get the word out. And thanks to everyone who's joining us online today. Wanted to start by acknowledging what we're going through as a country. If I had $1 for every time I've seen and heard the word unprecedented over the last couple of weeks, well, I don't know, I guess I could buy a lot of toilet paper. There's a lot of people out there on the front lines dealing with the repercussions, dealing with the health crisis, and making tough decisions. And there's also in the business world, we see a lot of tough decisions going on. And democracy and the health of our elections isn't necessarily top of mind. And we recognize that. That being said, it is our mission to ensure that democracy gets its due course, its due attention, because we think that it is fundamental to the functioning of every aspect of our country, and certainly how we deal with crises. I wanted to talk also about some of the positive things that we can do here. While everybody else is dealing with, whatever is most important, and we're feeling like we want to also help, we have a lot of options. Certainly at Business for America, we've been reevaluating our strategies and adjusting our approach. Based on the issues and tactics that we usually use, we're figuring out how to live in this new political reality. Our North Star remains true. We believe that the interests of the business community are aligned with the interests of the public in having a well-functioning democracy and in having a government that can get things done and do what makes sense for all of us together, because we all live in a society. So we do that in a number of ways. We're telling the story about the business case for democracy, the business case for well-functioning democracy. We believe, as I noted, it's bad for business, it's bad for competitiveness, but it's also bad for our employees, our customers, and our communities. And it's our responsibility as businesses who are successful on the basis of living in this country where we have this opportunity, where we can engage in enterprise, that we give back and we protect this system that has been so good for us, and we believe can continue to spread and share health and prosperity if we do it right. So we call this corporate civic responsibility. Much like corporate social responsibility or having ESG goals, environment, social, and governance goals, we're looking at those types of activities that are business appropriate and creating a platform where business can help us speak out, help us make this case for well-functioning democracy, and taking on the activities that they can do internally and within their communities to, say, give their employees time to vote and make sure their employees are active and engaged citizens and doing their civic duty, and also supporting their communities in that endeavor. That goes to the next level when we think about the things that businesses can do when we talk about advocating for change. Last year, we were really excited to lend our support to Act 77 in Pennsylvania. This year, we're talking about open primaries. We think that that is a wonderful set of legislation that will help reduce polarization and ensure that everybody can have a voice in the primaries as well as the general election. And of course, spreading time to vote and other ways to help people register, help them to engage in the process and ensure that everybody who has the right to vote can do so without undue burdens, but also making sure that those elections are secure, that we can really trust the results. And we don't believe that accessibility and security are at odds at all. We can have both. And as I alluded to also, we're eager to help reduce polarization and gridlock. And there are rules like open primaries, those small changes that can really change the incentives for how politicians operate, both in their campaigns and while in office. And we can see a reduction in polarization, a reduction in the hyperpartisanship that is frankly damaging the fabric of our society and preventing progress on so many issues, that these changes to the rule system will help us make that change in behavior. And it's going to reap benefits for everybody when government starts working better. So yeah, we believe that democracy is vital to the functioning of our government. It's vital to the functioning of our entire country. And as we all are figuring out how to address these unprecedented challenges that we're all facing today, and those challenges of the future, democracy is fundamental to all of that. So we're here to keep the fire lit, to ensure that the necessary attention is put into protecting that democracy, and holding our government accountable, and providing a nonpartisan platform for the rest of the business community to engage on this issue. So thank you again for joining us, and I'll hand it back to you, Richard.
Great, good. Thank you, Bonk. So we did have a number of organizations that were very helpful in co-hosting and co-promoting this. And I wanted to quickly recognize them and have two of them in particular say something. The first is Biz News PA, which is a publication, statewide publication, focusing on political and social and economic issues. We thank them. Secondly, the Poconos Chamber of Commerce, which is a local chamber of commerce, very helpful. The Committee of 70, based in Philadelphia, and Vibrant Pittsburgh. And let me start with just ask Sabrina Saunders to say a few quick words about what Vibrant Pittsburgh's work is and why they were interested in supporting this Time to Vote webinar. Sabrina?
Absolutely. Thanks so much for the opportunity, and I'm glad to participate this afternoon. For those of you that are not familiar, Vibrant Pittsburgh's mission is to build a thriving and inclusive Pittsburgh region. And we do that by working to help our member organizations attract and retain an elevated diversity of talent. We are a nonprofit organization, as I mentioned, membership organization that serves the greater Pittsburgh region's business community. That ranges from major corporations to small business startups. We directly provide leadership and expertise in diversity, equity, and inclusion to our member organizations in the hope of building a more inclusive and welcoming workplace for the members of our society. We want our members, our corporate members, to be leaders in spearheading inclusion and change. And so this initiative is very much in line with our work, with our mission, and Vibrant Pittsburgh is excited to be a part.
Great, good, Sabrina, thank you. And then I wanted to turn for a moment to David Thornburgh. David is with the Committee of 70, based in Philadelphia, and David's organization's been working on a number of nonpartisan political reform initiatives over the year. And David, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure, thanks, Richard. Thanks, Sarah. Thanks to all of you. I'm grateful to have a couple of minutes to deflect my attention away from what I'm sure consumes all of us in this public health situation, and to be reminded how important, as Sarah said, the health of our democracy is. And I try to think, when this crisis is over, can we leave democracy better off as a result of what we do over the next couple of months? Just a word about the Committee of 70. We were actually founded in 1904 in Philadelphia by a group of business and civic leaders who were concerned about the health of our local democracy. So some things never change, I guess. And over the years, we have championed issues around better politics and better government. Right now, just to underline some of those, Sarah mentioned a few of them. We're very supportive of open primaries here in Pennsylvania. We've been very involved in redistricting reform and hope there's still room for some movement on that issue. And right now, we're very interested in this topic, which is educating voters and making voters aware of the options that they have in this important election year. So delighted to be here. So one final thought. We had our last in-person board meeting about 2 weeks ago. There was a little poignant quality to it, but we had about 50 business and civic leaders on our board sitting down, and the topic in front of them was, how can companies embrace a culture of active civic and political engagement to benefit their employees, to benefit their corporate culture, and to benefit all of us. So that's the through line that we're trying to maintain, and I'm really glad to be part of this today.
Great, good, David, thank you. And just on that point, I would reiterate that, again, the focus of this conversation is how business leaders within their companies, regardless of the size of those firms, can play an active role in building a strong, vibrant democracy and civic culture, as David said. So moving on, let me introduce Rachel Boss, who is, Rachel's with the Pennsylvania Department of State, a community impact manager for that department. And Rachel has been thinking a lot about the enabling legislation signed by the governor last year, which now creates a number of new ways within which citizens in Pennsylvania can participate in the election. And so we wanted Rachel, Rachel to speak a little bit about some of those changes. We're going to be doing more education around that topic. And then also Rachel will talk a little bit about the likely postponement of the Pennsylvania primary, which had been scheduled for April 28th, but will likely be moved. So I'll turn it over to Rachel.
Thank you very much, Richard and Bonk. I very much appreciate the opportunity to participate in this webinar on behalf of the Department of State, and just really want to say thank you also to everyone who's watching and participating today, working with Business for America, and has an interest in this Time to Vote initiative. I think the Department of State is so pleased to have the opportunity to be able to share information that's vital for voters to know going into elections in 2020 and beyond. And we're really excited to have an opportunity to partner with you all to spread the information to voters through your networks so that we can all work together to make sure that voters are informed, have the information that they need, and are able to show up and participate in our elections this year. So I'm going to share my screen so that you all can see there's a presentation that will kind of help guide my conversation. I'm only going to provide a pretty brief overview today of some of the Act 77 changes and some of the other changes that we'll see in elections in Pennsylvania this year. And I will be happy to continue the conversation beyond today, hopefully in future collaborations, so that we can continue to respond to any questions that you may have about these changes and what you can do to partner with us at the Department of State. So the Department of State's Voter Education and Outreach Initiative is called Ready to Vote, or Ready to Vote 2020. And we put this together initially actually because Pennsylvania, as of the primary this year, all 67 counties have updated their voting systems to new secure voting systems that produce a paper record. Then with the passage of Act 77 in September of 2019, we realized that we had a lot more actually information that we need to share with the voters and need to make sure that they know going into the 2020 elections. So our Ready to Vote 2020 initiative covers basically the information that Pennsylvanians need to know about how voting is now more convenient due to the Act 77 reforms and more secure due to the new voting systems, and also with some of the tracking systems that we have in place now for voting by mail or voting from home. The big takeaways for Act 77, and these aren't the only things that were included in the legislation, but these are the things that impact voters most directly and the things that they should know about going into elections in 2020. The first really big one is the availability of mail-in voting or mail-in ballots. The second is that there's now more time to register to vote in Pennsylvania. And the third is that for those mail-in ballots, we now have extended deadlines. So previously with our absentee ballots that we have in Pennsylvania, the deadline was much in advance of Election Day. And now we have the ability to return those voted ballots up to 8 p.m. on Election Day, so until the close of polls on Election Day. For voter registration, previously in Pennsylvania, you had to register to vote 1 month in advance of an election. Now you have up until 15 days before the election. So, and I have 2 dates listed here, and that's what Richard was alluding to or referring to, is that currently the election in Pennsylvania, the primary election in Pennsylvania, is scheduled for April 28th, 2020. Legislators in Harrisburg or working remotely are currently working to craft and pass legislation that would move the primary to June 2nd. So as of today, the voter registration deadline is April 13th, which is 15 days in advance of April 28th. If the primary moves to, or when the primary moves to June 2nd, that voter registration deadline will be May 18th, 2020. And this deadline is very important for any voter to know, not just new voters, because it's also the deadline to update your voter registration record, any information that's on your voter record. So if you got married and changed your name, or if you moved, that's really the big one that people need to keep in mind. So if you move, you'll need to update your voter record so that it reflects your current home address. And the deadline to do that is looking like it's going to be May 18th. For the general election that will take place on November 3rd, that deadline is October 19th, 2020. The mail-in ballot option this year is really the big and exciting piece. So this is a new option in addition to absentee voting. And basically what happened is that absentee voting is defined and provided for in the Pennsylvania Constitution. So the legislation that passed, Act 77, did not amend the Pennsylvania Constitution to eliminate absentee voting. Instead, it created an additional category of mail ballots that are called mail-in ballots that are available for anyone who does not otherwise qualify for an absentee ballot. And that mail-in application does not require you to provide a reason or an excuse to vote. Some other states might refer to this as no excuse absentee voting. We don't call it that simply because we still also have absentee voting. So if you qualified as an absentee voter previously or will this year, because you will be absent from your municipality on Election Day, or because you have an illness or disability that prevents you from going to the polling place on Election Day, that absentee option is still the way to go, but everyone else has this option to use a mail-in ballot. And as I mentioned earlier, we have until 8 p.m. on Election Day to return the voted ballot to the county election office. There is a change on this point from previous policy, which is that the county election office must receive the voted absentee or mail-in ballot by 8 p.m. on Election Day. So postmarks are no longer valid in Pennsylvania in terms of receiving a timely either application for the ballot or the return of the ballot. The county needs to receive both of those by the deadline in order to accept them. The application for mail-in and absentee ballots is now available online. That's pretty exciting. You can access that on our votespa.com website, or you can always go in and return your application in person. Actually, this is another pretty new and exciting option for if you turn in your absentee or mail-in application in person at your county election office. If the ballot is ready, you can ask for that ballot as part of that same transaction, and that's what we're calling the over-the-counter processing. So ballots for a given election are generally ready 3 to 5 weeks before the election. You can contact the local county election office to find out if your ballot is ready. So you go in and hand in your application and you ask for your ballot in that same transaction. You can actually vote it right there and then return it in that same time, much like early voting. So there are, of course, a few differences, but that is something that you can do all in one transaction instead of going to the polling place on election day. I also want to mention there is a new option to be put on what's called a permanent list. So you'll also see this option if you register to vote or update your voter registration in Pennsylvania as part of the application now. You can elect to get all of your ballots for the entire calendar year by mail by just simply checking a box, either when you register to vote or when you apply for your absentee or mail-in ballot. And that means that, so if I applied today, I would get my primary ballot, any special election ballots that take place this year for my election district, as well as the general election ballot in the mail. And then in 2021, I would get an application mailed to my house where I could renew that annual status or permanent status so that I would keep getting my ballots in the mail. And then one thing that I do want to note before we move on from this topic is just that there's another change related to absentee and mail-in ballots. Previously in Pennsylvania, if you voted by mail-in or absentee ballot, or if you voted by absentee ballot, you could go to your polling place and vote in person to void out your absentee vote. That is no longer the case in Pennsylvania. Your mail-in or absentee ballot is final. If you go to the polling place on election day, after you have returned a voted absentee or mail-in ballot, you will not be allowed to vote on a voting system. If you believe that there's an error, for example, the poll book says that you voted by mail-in ballot, but you believe you did not, you can vote by provisional ballot. The same thing is the case if you receive a mail-in or absentee ballot but don't return it. Your only option to vote at the polling place will be by provisional ballot. But you could still always take that mail-in or absentee ballot that you received in person to the county election office up to 8 p.m. on election day. And then the last thing that I wanted to mention, just so that you're all aware, we do have information about those new voting systems on our Votes PA website. It is at votespa.com/ready-to-vote. So if you scroll down on that page, you'll see a map of Pennsylvania with all the counties, and you can select your county, and you'll be taken to a page that walks you through step by step how to use the new voting system in your county. So, but please feel free to go ahead and explore that site. I know I'm actually over time for my 5 to 7 minute presentation, so I'll stop there.
Okay, great, good. Rachel, thanks so much. That's really, really helpful. And just to remind everyone, we are going to hold a separate webinar in the third week of April on Act 77, and we'll have Rachel back with us, and as well as one or two of the legislators that helped to get that bill passed in the state legislature. So now let me turn to the main act here, which is the Time to Vote initiative. I'm going to ask JJ Huggins with Patagonia, who's really the point person within the Time to Vote initiative, to give everyone a sense and understanding of what is the Time to Vote initiative, from whence did it come, and what are its primary objectives. So JJ, I'll turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, Richard, and thank you, Business for America, and everyone who's joining this webinar today. Obviously, we're in a really difficult time in our country and in the world right now, and I think this time underscores what we're all going through right now, really underscores the importance of businesses to take care of their people, take care of their employees, and also the importance of government to take care of the citizens especially when businesses are not capable to do so, and vice versa. Businesses need to take care of their people when the government can't do so. And there needs to be a really strong private-public partnership right now in every facet of our society as we're dealing with this virus that's going around. And time to vote kind of falls into that category of a partnership of a lot of facets of our culture. Patagonia is in a really special position where we are, despite being closed right now due to coronavirus, we've closed all of our stores, our distribution center, our offices, everyone's working from home if they can, but we're still paying all of our employees. Everyone's getting their full pay, their benefits, and that really stems from our values as a company. And for those of us who work for Patagonia, nobody was really surprised to see that decision made to keep everyone on the payroll as we go through this crisis. Time to vote is one of those reasons why we weren't surprised by our leadership's moves right now as we deal with coronavirus. Time to vote is a program that Patagonia helped to start a couple years ago. Back in 2016, our CEO, Rose Marcario, made the decision to close all of our stores and offices on election day for the general election that year so that all of our employees could literally have all the time they needed that day to vote. There was going to be no one on our staff anywhere in the US who had to choose between showing up for work and voting. By doing that, we sent a signal to all of our employees that nothing is more important than voting on election day. And that also sent a signal to our customers and other folks in the business community. In 2018, we decided we wanted to scale this a little bit and try to get some other people in corporate America to jump on board. So in the run up to the 2018 midterm election, we formalized this program and called it Time to Vote. We partnered with Levi's and PayPal, mainly because we have friends at those companies. We've worked with them in the past, and we wanted to formalize this program and scale it and get other companies to join on. By joining Time to Vote, the only requirement you have as a business is that you are going to make some time and or accommodations for your employees to vote in the general election. How you do it is up to you. How you run your business is up to you. Patagonia, we take things to the extreme and we close on election day. Levi's, for example, gives their employees 3 to 5 hours of paid time off on election day so that their folks can get to the polls. There's no prescription for how to do this. We offer some guidance for companies how to do this, but we don't dictate anything to anyone other than we ask that if you join Time to Vote, you pledge to give your employees the time and the accommodations they need to vote in the general election. We launched this in 2018. We thought maybe we'd get a couple dozen companies to sign on and it'd be this sort of nice initiative. And we had 411 companies join that year. It got a lot of media attention, and it was seen as one of the factors that helped lead to the voter turnout that year. The voter turnout in the 2018 midterm election was the highest turnout this country has seen for a midterm in the last 40 years. And we think we had a small part to play in that. Fast forward to this year, 2020, we have recruited more than 450 companies to join Time to Vote with the goal of having 1,000 companies by the time we get to election day in November. The long-term vision for this Time to Vote project, looking beyond this year, is to help lead to a shift in the culture where more Americans cherish their right to vote and take that right seriously and don't waste that right. And those of us in Time to Vote, we've heard a lot of feedback from the rank and file employees around the country. We've heard feedback that they really appreciate this program. They appreciate hearing their company leader say that voting is not only important and not only do we think you should vote, but we're going to give you the time you need to do that, so that you don't have to choose between putting in a few hours of work and getting paid and hitting the polls, or putting in the couple hours that it takes to study your ballot and vote by mail and vote. They're going to make accommodations for all of their employees. And we're seeing this as a force that can lead to this culture shift in America, where more people vote, and we'll see the voter participation rate hopefully increase over the years. That's our long-term plan. A lot of companies, and some of you on this call may be thinking, well, we already do this type of thing anyway, and that's okay. That just makes it that much easier for you to join Time to Vote. There are strength in numbers with this project. We are trying to generate some FOMO, some fear of missing out. And we want companies to join Time to Vote, even if you're already doing this for your workers, because that'll entice more companies to jump on, to join the movement. We have some major companies already signed on. We have Walmart, Target, Best Buy, JP Morgan Chase. These are American companies with diverse workforces that affect a lot of people of all walks of life. And we want this to reach as many people as possible. Thank you.
Great. Good, JJ, thank you. And we're going to hear a little bit more about Patagonia's actions on the ground and a little later in this call from Rebecca, but who also works with Patagonia. But now let me turn to AJ Bruno, and AJ is the CEO and founder of QuotaPath, which is has an office in Philly as well as in Austin, Texas. And QuotaPath has been involved in Time to Vote, and we wanted to hear from AJ about how it's being implemented in QuotaPath. So AJ, thank you.
Thanks, Richard. And it's obviously really inspiring to hear a story like Patagonia's from JJ. So just listening to all of the different movements and at that scale is really, really impressive. We're a little bit on the other end of the spectrum, where our company is actually only 2 years old. But the backstory for us and Time to Vote starts well before that. So I'm a second-time founder. My first company was based in Austin, Texas, and it's where actually I got a little bit more politically just involved in just understanding voting rights and understanding how it works, mostly because Texas had a period where you could go and vote early. And so at my previous company, there was a group of us that would always go and vote together, and it kind of just happened naturally. It was just really easy. There's a voting polling center right next to us. And it got me thinking in my next company how we could kind of empower that and enact that. So from day one, I knew I wanted to be part of QuotaPath's culture, and just started with I think it was a little bit of a perk, but really just thought about it in way of like how can we just kind of operationalize this, and gave election day off. That was like a no-brainer, easy win that we could do from the get-go. And when our first hires joined with Darby and Eric, we talked a lot about this, and they felt that vision and mission as well. And it really started with community. But it tied to our core values, which empathy, inclusion, transparency, and being data-driven. So ultimately, we went that route, and it was a no-brainer to join Time to Vote in 2018. How do we operationalize it? I already mentioned the offering paid time off, but we really feel like it's inspired employees to be more responsible and to participate and be more active in their own community as well. I'm really cautious and careful with words and how we talk about it and address it in stand-ups or whatever the case, but the act of going and voting is the most important thing to the security of our democracy. And so that I'm just very hammer all the time and make sure that we celebrate small wins with our vote. I voted today, or I voted stickers. Those type of things are really part of our culture. As far as primary, we have flexibility. Obviously, Texas has already voted, but we want to make sure that people feel like that they can leave and go and have time. So take the time whenever you need it, wherever that may be. And this awareness has just started to organically happen within the office, whether it's within our own communication channels, buzzing leading up to election day, or we're sharing resources and polling places as well. And that type of outing that I had in Austin for my previous company has transpired with QuotaPath as well. So the Austin office does this as well. And we just really feel a connection to time to vote. And I think that that also persists a little bit from a technology standpoint, where for our own platform, we think about security and privacy as well, both in our terms and then what we do as an organization. So overall, I think that there's a massive opportunity for us as we scale to take that and impart it. And as I mentioned at the beginning, to inspire to do things at the level that Patagonia does. But for now, we feel like we're doing our part and are really proud to be a part of Time to Vote.
Great, good. AJ, thank you. Let me just ask you a quick question. So
Sure.
as the CEO there, are you communicating these values on you know, your views and the importance of this on a regular basis through email? Do you have a sit-down meeting with the whole team? And, you know,
Yeah. As far as our own values, there's something that we came up with early, but we always evaluate and make sure that they still feel like they're a part of our culture and our mission and vision, to the point where sometimes we think about them as aspirational values. But ultimately, every couple months we're thinking about them. We had a management offsite at the beginning of the year discussing them. I discussed them in strategic sessions. I discussed them at the board level. So they're always front and center. And of course, they're communicated with the company and the team. And since a lot of them match things that we think about or we're talking about for Time to Vote, it's just a really easy opportunity during election time to like pull that forward because it's a part of who we are and what we do for our culture.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great. Thank you. Thank you. So let me turn to another Philadelphia-based company, Azavea, and Robert Cheetham is the CEO and founder there. And Robert's company, I think, is a bit larger than QuotaPath, about 50 people. And Robert, you have been involved in this for a while, and you know, be curious to know how you are operationalizing the Time to Vote program in Azavea.
Thanks, Richard. Yeah, this is something we've actually been doing for about 15 years. Azavea itself is almost 20 years old. We are what's known as a B corporation. So B stands for benefit, and as such, we're a mission-driven for-profit company, and our mission is around advancing the state-of-the-art in geospatial technology and then applying that for civic, social, and environmental impact. Civic impact is embedded in a lot of the work that we do, whether that's on climate change, water, or even work related to elections. Because of that element of our mission, and that we pick and choose projects, software and data analytics projects based on that mission, this type of thing came very naturally. We offer a number of other time off options that are also perhaps somewhat unusual. We offer paid volunteer time. We offer up to a week every 2 years for disaster relief, which has turned out to be something people are taking advantage of in the current COVID crisis. And we obviously offer time off for things like jury duty and so on. And for us, this has simply been part of the way we've operated for most of the history of the company, from the time when we were probably only about 8 or 10 people to the point where we're now over 50. The way we have operationalized that is we don't give an entire day off. We allow people to take up to 2 hours. That's usually enough unless there's some overwhelming amount of people in the queue. People can take that at the beginning of the day, end of the day, middle of the day at their discretion. If there were a situation where there were long queues, we'd probably simply extend that. But it's essentially time that people can take on their way to work, on the way home, or take off. Middle of the day, we track that. We're a services firm, so we track our time anyway, and this is simply another type of time off that we track over time. From a cost perspective, it's minuscule. Almost everyone uses it for each election, but it's generally not a huge amount of time. It might be a half hour or an hour per person, and doesn't represent any significant impact, but it is symbolic. We've had people tell tell us over the years that this type of thing, while not a big deal from a personal impact perspective, is symbolic of the company's commitment to its mission and its commitment to civic impact. We do try to prepare people for this. We remind them about it. I send out an email about a week before each election. We do this for both primary and general elections at local, state, and federal level. I send out an email and just reminding people of the policy, how to record their time, but also to send out additional information. So, for example, for Philadelphia, David's organization, the Committee of 70, posts a election guide that will walk you through all of the candidates and all of the questions that are up for referenda. And so we'll send out a link to Committee of 70's guide. It's another local journalism outfit, Billy Penn, that does a procrastinator's guide to the election, and we'll send that out alongside the Committee of 70 information, and just get people set up. In the past few years, we've had a number of colleagues who have wanted to remain with the company but have left the region. So we now have remote staff in Arizona, Maine, Illinois, and other parts of the country. And one of the challenges has been just keeping track of reminding those people that this is there and making them feel part of it. But for the most part, this has been a very successful benefit we've offered over a long period of time, and very much woven into our culture.
And Robert, just say something about the impact it seems to be having on people's motivation to work for Azavea, and also, do you think it's having an impact on the workforce becoming more educated and more interested in government and public policy and civic life?
I think that because we are a B Corporation, a mission-driven company, we have attracted a cohort of colleagues who are civically and socially engaged to begin with. I'm not sure that our time to vote policy has increased that per se, but they repeatedly express appreciation for the fact that it's there. It is one amongst many other things that we try to do to be civically engaged. In our COVID-19 communication to people, we have proactively encouraged them to reach out to their elected representatives who are engaged in difficult dialogues and conversations about how to respond. And I know a number of people have done that. I think it's part of an overall approach to our culture. One of our cultural values is create more value than you capture, and that gets expressed in a whole range of different ways, with time to vote being one of them.
Mm-hmm. Okay, great, thank you. Thank you. Good, so let's go back to Patagonia and learn a little bit more from Rebecca Goodstein about how Patagonia operationalizes this, because as JJ noted, Patagonia, I think, has 1,000 employees. I may be off with that. You'll tell us. And those people are doing all kinds of things. Not everyone's sitting in an office. People are out in retail operations, which can be more complicated to manage in a program like this. So Rebecca, give us, if you would, a little, insight into the nuts and bolts of how Patagonia makes this work.
Sure, thanks, Richard. Yeah, I work a lot with our retail colleagues who are kind of boots on the ground ambassadors for the Patagonia mission, including the store in Pittsburgh in the Shadyside neighborhood. So I think what Robert said about it being symbolic really resonated with me. I think the fact that it comes down from our CEO and our founder that this is a priority for the company, so much so that we're closing our doors on election day, really empowers the staff to not only, they're very proud of that, and it empowers them to talk to customers about the fact that they have the paid day off to vote, and that this is a company priority, and that we're trying to get other companies to join us. So I've seen that really give almost give agency to our retail colleagues to try to recruit folks locally. Because our retail stores are now closed, but our colleagues are still getting paid, which is great. We've been working with them to give some virtual activism opportunities that they can do when they're working from home to help support our grantees. In addition, we have asked them to help recruit more local businesses that they work with for the Time to Vote campaign. And it's been a really positive focus. I know that a lot of local businesses are having a hard time right now, but that's a really nice thing to connect on, and kind of a, in the spirit of optimism, looking toward the future and feeling like we do have an election to look forward to. And this is something we can do to help out our community.
Great, good. Rebecca, thank you. And we would be happy to, talk to you further about initiatives and other places in the East Coast, which is, I know, is your territory, and maybe webinars in Maryland and
Sure.
Elsewhere, so we can do that.
Definitely.
Great, thank you.
Great.
Good. Well, let me now turn to our colleague Joe Petrucci in Philadelphia. Joe is the business outreach coordinator for Business for America and is our guy on the ground organizing businesses. And Joe used to be out about a lot, but now he, like the rest of us, is working and living in place. But Joe's been organizing a number of projects and initiatives to engage business. We wanted to give you a sense of what we have coming up. So Joe, go ahead.
Richard, thank you. My name is Joe Petrucci. I live in Ardmore, just outside of West Philadelphia. I'm a native of the Poconos and worked a good bit of time in Wilkes-Barre and Scranton. So I'm pretty familiar with the eastern side of the state for sure. Former journalist, I've worked in nonprofits and PR and small business. I joined Business for America last month as the statewide business outreach coordinator. And our work on the ground in Pennsylvania continues to shift as the news changes every day. We are tailoring our outreach to make this connection that civic health supports public health, and understanding that for the time being, we're staying focused on strategic partnerships while conditions hopefully improve to continue our outreach in earnest. It's also important to note that our outreach is inclusive, that we are engaging in counties and in every corner of the state and with business leaders and groups who represent diverse backgrounds. Our work, is only successful when there's engagement from what are perceived to be both red and blue leaning companies. So we need this to really represent everyone. With the guidance of Rachel and the Department of State, we will be conducting outreach around Act 77 education to make sure that businesses are equipped to provide direction to their employees, particularly around mail-in voting and some of the other things that Rachel outlined earlier. We are planning a webinar, as Richard mentioned, for next month, and that will serve to really what we hope to, to empower the business community in communicating Act 77 changes to their employees. We'll also be joining Fair Districts PA and their push for fair redistricting in Pennsylvania, where gerrymandering has created voting districts and processes that do not reflect the interest of residents and citizens. There is current legislation in Pennsylvania that would create a citizen commission and a roadmap for fair redistricting going forward. We're also working with Open Primaries PA to make sure that the roughly 1 million Pennsylvanians left out of the primary process because they aren't registered to one of the two major parties have a voice in open primary elections. So both fair redistricting and open primaries, create, again, we come back to more political competition. We come back to increased voter turnout and making elections fairer and more secure. So this really is going to be the center of my work and the rest of our team on the ground in PA. And really, I think the key is finding common ground with business groups and businesses of all kinds across the state who have the capacity for or an interest in this kind of civic engagement. So I do hope that you'll reach out to me to discuss any opportunities for your business group or your company to get involved in our work, which will eventually include in-person events when conditions allow. for such things. So certainly looking forward to that as well. But I'll be, you know, I'm sure I'll be following up with many of you after today's webinar. So thank you for participating today.
Great, good, thank you, Joe. You know, JJ, this initiative has been designed to include small companies, you know, mid-sized, large companies, and what seems to be, you know, the central guidance that you'd offer to any executive, he or she thinking about initiating this in their company? What are, you know, 2-3 things that are really critical to think about when launching this in your company?
I would just do it, for one thing. I like what our friend said earlier about create more value than you capture. I mean, that words to live by right there. That is, if you're running a company, and all the panelists, I mean, are all in this same vein. I mean, there's so much more to running a business these days than simply making money. People want to work for a company that has real purpose. Create more value than you capture. By giving your employees time to vote, you're creating more value for those employees and more value for your municipality, your state, the entire country. You're creating value for everyone because you're giving them the time they need to be civically engaged, to have their voice be heard. And the more people who can do that, the healthier our country and our democracy will be. And one of the reasons we hear very often, one of the excuses people give for not voting is that they didn't have time on election day. And then another excuse is that they didn't feel educated. They didn't take the time to do the research on the candidates and the various ballot measures. And therefore they gave that right up. They forgot that right and they let other people make their choice for them. And that's not good for our democracy. So I think all of the business leaders out there live by those words: create more value than you capture.
Great, good, thank you. And Robert, thank you for reminding us of that central tenet of you know, operating in society: create more value than you capture. So I don't see any questions from others. So let me just wrap up by thanking all the panelists and our co-hosts for getting the word out. This really is a community effort. We want this throughout the state of Pennsylvania to be a diverse, inclusive, participatory effort. We want small and mid-size and large companies to participate from all sectors and all regions of the state, so that business leaders in the Keystone State can really distinguish themselves as great civic champions. And this is clearly a time in our culture, and I think in our history as Americans, where business people can really lead and help set a good example of what active citizenship looks like. So we are available to talk to any of you going forward. Look forward to working with the organizations and businesses on the line here. And feel free to reach out. And we thank you for your participation today. And stay safe, stay healthy. Do get out and do some exercising. And we will see you all soon, hopefully. Thank you.